Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the ScholarAI Founders Pod. As usual, check us out on all the podcast locations and find us at our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe and leave your comments in the sections below, and we will get to your comments in some upcoming episodes. Today, we're joined by another member of the ScholarAI team, Scott. I will let Scott introduce himself and let Lakshay give you kind of the primer for Scott and his time at ScholarAI. So, Lakshay, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So Scott he's a recent Duke grad, so a lot of our team's from Duke. But Scott's just cool, man. He's part of the engineering team. He has a lot of interest in like technology in general. If you ever meet him, like when I first met him, the intention was to talk about AI and LMs. We ended up talking about EEG and Bitcoin and all this sort of future stuff. Conversation was completely derailed from what I was trying to understand, but it was great. And Scott has a lot of just a very keen interest in technology and like just the state of what it could do for the world, which I think as people in technology, it's very nice to be surrounded by futurists. On the team, he works on a lot of things, but works a lot on extraction of content, organization of LM materials, and in his undergrad, or not undergrad, but his grad school program was working on Rust-based LM tech, which is pretty cool. So I'll let Scott take away, just do a little bit more introducing of himself, talk about what it's been like working with ScholarAI, and then we can kind of go from there.
Hello, guys. I'm Scott, and recently graduated from Duke, and I was study for data science in here, and mainly my research is just about large language model and then apply using the Rust. And so mainly I working in ScholarAI as a software developer, and then basically I do like a lot of abstractions, like for example, like recently I working with basically the OCR part. So mainly kind of like develop kind of like a new ways to extract like the data more accurately and faster. So that's mostly about like me. Yeah.
You want to? This is again, Scott's just kind of like a box of surprises in general. Do you want to kind of like talk about your background, like basically like start from like undergrad and then just like tell about where you've been and how you got to here, just like time wise.
Cool. So my undergrad was in Wisconsin-Madison. So I was a bachelor, studied for basically math, physics, and then finance, statistics, and economics, 5 majors. And then after that, I went to JP Morgan for working as a data scientist for a couple of years. And then after that, I was back in China for a while and then be a rocket scientist. And then working there for another 2 years, something. And then decide it's the time to actually go back to school and then improving me a little bit. And then I just back in Duke in here and then study for data science again. And then I just like, one day I like saw actually Damon was like posting in the Duke Founders group about it. Yeah, we have a ScholarAI here and then welcome to join. I was like, yeah, that's my research about. So I was like reaching out and say, okay, that's a really good opportunities. And then it's really about my interest and my research still. So I was like reaching out and then, I'm here. I was in the group. And I'm super excited, and so I'm really pleasure for actually sticking to working with you guys.
What has ScholarAI as like a experience of just like being an engineer working on this stuff been like compared to? Obviously, you have JP Morgan, which I'm sure a lot of people listening to I'll be super aware of, and then you have being a rocket scientist, which is such a high departure from anything and everything.
So I would say working for startup is kind of like it's much more free, and also it's give me that it's like okay. Let's talking about this. So basically, if you're working for some like a big firm, for like a JP Morgan, or just as a rocket scientist working for like some government issue company, you don't really having that much freedom to do whatever you want, or it's like extend your interest about things. So you have to, just like taking the, task about like your boss tell you what to do, and then you just like finish it. You don't get like a lot of chance to explore the thing that you're interested with, or just like something in your mind you cannot really actually achieve to. You don't really have the time to actually making that to become the real thing. But in ScholarAI is more about, I would say that working environment is giving like a lot of freedom to think what I need or what I actually can use in different tasks or in different ways to solving the problem. And that's probably just like give me like a lot of time to actually think, a lot of time to do my research, and also just like give me like a lot of free time to explore myself, I would say. And you can extend your interest in different, ways, different directions, but it's like towards for the final goal. So in that way, it's like I got more time to, develop myself while I'm working. So I really love that working environment.
What do you think, if you want to talk about technology more broadly, like what is exciting to you about technology in like a 5 to 10 to 20 year time frame? Like what do you look forward to in the world of technology?
Let's put it in this way. So as we can talking with kind of like a data background about data driving words right now is like everything AI. So I would say in 5 to 10 years, a lot of jobs going to be replaced by AI in general. So as a kind of like as a developer in general, a lot of work going to be replaced by ChatGPT or some other AI models. So we don't really need that much people to working in the industry. So it will be the tech will going to be tools for a really like more bold or more creative words. So we can basically thinking about like the AI developing right now is more like we kind of creating the tools for creations. So in general, I would say like for example, like in arts, like in arts or design, people are going to be using AI a lot, or it's like video creating or like content creating. It's more about people. It's more about people's creation. The tool or the basic technology going to be supporting for them. So I would say the industry going to be shrinking for a little bit for developers, but will be expanding a lot for most like creative related jobs.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your creative side, Scott? Because that is also a very interesting thing about you that I feel like people should be aware of. Just like you and your hobbies, rather.
Okay, so I'm kind of like I consider myself as an artist as well. I'm a photographer, and I also design for. I have my own brand. It's called a Bellman. Basically design for shirt and stuff. So I also draw a lot. So I also create like a lot of NFT stuff. But it's back in days. But right now, the industry is dying, so nobody actually in there. But yeah, it's just like I having a lot of things in my mind. I have a hobby, just like I draw my dream. So like just like when actually having something during the nights in your dream is just popping out. I just like waking up immediately, and just kind of like a book, just like beside my pillow. So it's like waking up immediately and then draw it like 5 a.m. something like that. It's just like having that kind of like a hobby to actually recording for your dream. Or I think it's just giving me like a lot of creations about things. Because like during the day life, you won't having that much time to actually having that imaginations going on in your mind. But the dream is kind of like my resource.
Yeah. I obviously, Scott and I talk all the time, so maybe there are some interview questions that Damon or Shashi have in this little kind of half late night show we're doing. But
yeah, I think it's interesting. I think one of the threads I want to pull on from Scott that he said that I think is particularly interesting is this idea that AI is going to essentially strip away a lot of the kind of quote unquote commodity work that people are doing and allow them to focus on kind of the more creative aspects. Lakshay, I want to hear kind of your perspective first. Number one, do you think that some of the tools that are already available in AI, whether it be ChatGPT or, GitHub Copilot as an example, are allowing you to do that right now? You're spending less time maybe debugging or copying and pasting from Stack Overflow or something like that and working on the more creative parts? Or do you, I guess kind of where's your gauge of that progress? And then Scott, after Lakshay, would love to hear kind of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think with in general, like the promise of it is there, and I definitely think at like an unconscious level, it is helping me significantly. Like I guess like I feel less of that difference than is actually happening very realistically. I think with the way that these tools are set up currently is that like it's still not perfect, and I also feel like I haven't done a lot of discovery to like. I would be really curious to try something like Devin, but that's just like not super available. Where the flow of how I work is still like it assumes ChatGPT or Copilot is in the loop somehow. But a lot of the time, it's very much like, okay, Copilot's just not going to get this right. Like I have to go read the documentation and try again the proper way and do it as if Copilot never existed sometimes. I think like ideally, I think something that's missing is just in the context of code, right? Like coding is inherently like a creativity and a problem solving thing. Like the manual work of writing out like 500 lines that solve your problem is not the correct thing to be spending time on, right? Like that's just inevitably what a lot of the time gets sunk into. One thing I would like to see more of that I wish these tools could do that a lot of them are trying to is having sufficient context. Right now, a lot of them simply just cannot see enough code or look at enough files and also have a general sense of like what version of this library you're using or what version of this code like you should be referencing to then build out a solution. So in most cases, like you still have to be the person who catches that flaw yourself or provides that context yourself. And that way it's not as seamless as you kind of hope that these tools would be.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, I think that it applies not just to coding as well, but the way that I would describe it is AI is very good in many cases at self-encapsulated tasks. Like you said, as the context information that needs to be known in order to achieve the objective grows, it begins to outpace kind of what AI is currently capable of. That I'm finding that in writing, research, coding as well. So I do think that's similar. Scott, I'm just curious, what AI tools are you using to help you with development efforts, both kind of in ScholarAI and beyond, and where are you finding those kind of tools?
Yeah, so basically for coding parts, I'm mainly just using ChatGPT for sure. But I find out ChatGPT is not really helping for, generate like really precise way or precise code for functionalities, but it's more helping me to organize my idea for that workflow and then the process for achieving the goal. It's really good at it. So sometimes like they use like a lot of sorting, like mind for the coding strategy and stuff, but you have to decide which one is the kind of like the best to achieve the goal. I think ChatGPT is kind of like a really good for that part, and it's helping me to organize my idea and then just like building the process toward the goal. So that's for coding part, and then beyond that, I was like doing like a lot of research about like a kind of like a voice, field. Sometimes because I don't know if you guys know about like last week the 11 Love they just like launching for some like new models for kind of like reducing the voice, the noisy from the interview and whatever. It was like kind of like mind blowing. Like they like actually have like a lot of use case for that. So like it's like for example like a phone call or like in the future it's like when you're calling in like in public, you want to reducing all the voice and like noises. That'll be really, really useful. And sometimes, and they also launching for kind of like another models to kind of like turn the famous people voice into alive. And then that kind of like kind of like also for like a creation for using the AI. I think this kind of tool is like helping people like thinking about like a different ways for creation or just like using the different cases. It's really boosting the productiveness.
Actually, I'm curious. Out of curiosity, Shashi, like with have you used like an AI tool for like non-technical stuff? Like, have you ever used like a financial tool that has AI embedded? And what's your experience like with that been, if any?
Probably turned on a couple of experimental modes for technology. I haven't been blown away by anything that left a lasting impression that felt like, oh, this is really slick. So it feels like that's largely an unsolved space. But yeah, I'm curious. Have you?
No, I haven't. It's just like I mean, I keep making jokes about this on this podcast, but I'm very dumb with money in general, and watching where my cash is going. I'm of kind of the opinion where like my ideal. I started reading. You guys know the book, The Intelligent Investor. I popped this book open on like page 1 or 2. I started reading. I was like, this is not making sense. I put it away for 3 years. And I guess all that's kind of says that like in my head there is just like there's a management platform I'd really like to work where like there's all these like financial like rules and systems that like it's its own kind of like arcane mythology to understand. I'd really like for there to just be a system that just like takes that away and I don't have to think about any of that complexity. It just like works. clearly that doesn't exist because I am still stupid with my money. I just put it in ETFs and hope and pray that they do something. But I was just wondering if you found stuff that does exist, how are they, that sort of thing. But I don't know, it sounds like none of them are pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think it gets commenting. It's two comments, I guess. Number one, I think this gets to the feature or product question of AI, where what you're kind of describing is like you don't really want an entirely new reworked system. You just want AI to be injected such that it's breaking down the barriers to using kind of the existing system. I think that in general, it's an interesting way to think about AI, not just solving financial problems, but a lot of problems, maybe even some of the problems that we have kind of ideated working on internally at ScholarAI. And then unrelated to that, but then kind of to your comments on the ETFs and stuff, has anyone ever seen the graph where it's like kind of the wisest of people do essentially what the idiot does? And there's this entire bell curve in the middle where people basically spend all this time in this kind of chasm of overthinking and over optimizing. And essentially, if you just do whatever the idiot would do, in most cases, you end up in a better spot than significantly overthinking. So I'm saying all that to give a little bit of validation to the fact that usually low cost ETFs and indexing and diversifying that way is the best way to go. And it's very, very difficult to, write algorithms or something like this to beat the market where people spend kind of their entire careers only to not beat, an S&P 500 ETF. So
I appreciate the ego shield, Damon. Thank you.
That's I want to change gears. I'd like to go to. Yeah. I want to go to rockets. All right, so let's go back 5 years. VTOL was talked about as something imminent. Like we were going to have VTOL taxis. We were going to have vertical. VTOL is vertical takeoff and landing. We were going to have Ubers where you could jump in an Uber, it would go above traffic, fly across town, and drop you off in 10 minutes to the thing that would take you an hour to drive to. And the odd thing that's happened is we've sort of lost all of the VTOL talk. The only VTOL stuff I could find in just doing some cursory research was Palmer Lucky's company, Anduril, was doing some VTOL-based military applications. What happened to that? Do any of you guys know what happened to the VTOL movement? What makes that hard?
I just assume that there's a lot of regulatory barrier in FAA regulations and getting these things to a requirement level of safety and whatnot. I love the fantasy idea of these personal spaceships and whatever. It's just there's clearly so much that goes into how we put stuff in the air that makes that very, very hard. I have a drone hobby, and increasing every single week there's a new regulation that pops up that's basically okay, this is a useless hobby. I can't take this thing anywhere basically unless I have these 17 licenses. I don't know.
Yeah, but you live in Oregon with the lefties and so in Texas you probably would not have any of this complexity.
Yeah, there's a lot of trees I could accidentally start fires on here, unfortunately. So there is a time I almost took out a power line with the drone, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, my only experience with this really is that I know when Amazon was doing a lot of discovery around last mile delivery with drones, there was just simply a lot of regulatory hurdle, like Lachey is describing. So I do think in large part, it's number one, it's a highly regulated industry, being aviation. And anytime you talk about personal aviation, it becomes, I think, even more highly regulated because now you're talking about kind of personal safety and who's going to be held liable in the event that, a personal submarine that is on an adventure to see the sunken Titanic, as an example, crashes and everyone inside it dies, right? So I think that you're just opening that can of worms and people have been thus far hesitant to do it. All that said, it feels like there's no other solution to the type of traffic congestion and things happening in the LAs and San Franciscos of the world. New York City, I'm sure is similarly problematic. It's unclear to me if aviation is the answer because the alternative would be something like Elon Musk's Boring company, right? So getting to a third dimension in kind of the opposite direction. I don't know that I particularly have a theory for which one is more likely. But I do think in large part, it's some parts technical impedance, Shashi, as you're describing, and then probably a large part regulatory.
To push back on the regulatory, like if it was just that, wouldn't you see in countries that didn't have the same regulatory environment some amount of advancement that you wouldn't see maybe in the US, for example? Like, couldn't you, if you were good at that, wouldn't you just go somewhere with a low regulatory environment and just prove that you could do it?
It's a great question. I think where my mind goes with that question is what country simultaneously has less regulatory hurdle than the US or similar, and enough capital to afford a service like that, because this is not something where it would be low cost to deliver. These personal flying vehicles or even some sort of advanced helicopter or whatever is going to be an expensive endeavor. And I just don't know immediately off the top of my head of what country is at the intersection of low regulatory environment, high enough net worth individuals they could afford these services in volume.
Dubai has those flying police motorcycles, but those fly for 28 minutes. So that's obviously its own issue. But that does seem like the sort of thing where like that application is like, okay, yeah, like a flying motorcycle, like a police person can like hover above the streets and just fly around. But it's the sort of thing where like, again, like one of the big things with like a drone that you can't do is like you can't fly above people. I haven't ever looked into an article, but I am certain there is some case where this Dubai motorcycle fell out of the sky for some reason or another. And just because it was Dubai, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like it just got like, what a shame. Let's keep this program going because it's cool and fancy. And to that end, like I think like regulatory wise, like something like that, like flying personal motorcycle, it's a cool concept and all, but like there's also like depending on who the consumer is of that thing, like there's just like a certain level of form factor and convenience that I don't think exists yet, right? Like I don't think most people are going to pay for like a blue ocean launch that puts them across the world. It's more convenient and familiar to take a flight. Like the early adopter curve there is like probably someone who's very, very wealthy and naturally like experimental in nature. And that's just not a very big group of people, I suppose. The like personal vehicles and that sort of stuff. Like I know like people will keep making like these like flying cars and stuff like that. But again, I think it's just like, it is still in the state where those ideas are treated as fantastical and not realistic or practical to replace a modern system. Like the boring tunnel that's kind of Damon alluded to is like, that's so familiar in that it's just fundamentally like a underground train that is very fast. That probably has a very natural adoption curve if it were to exist. But something like a flying vehicle would be like a very, very long process to lead to consumer adoption or like even just like early adopter adoption, because the use cases in which you can begin to apply those things feel very narrow.
Are we headed for a space in which this technology is not necessary, assuming autonomous cars get good enough? Like if autonomous cars solve traffic, is this technology still necessary? Does this solve some other thing other than maybe, experiential, for lack of a better word?
That might be it, Damon. I think that's probably the most plausible answer to me, is that actually it's just not that useful, even if you can solve it. That feels like the most reasonable answer. All right, I want to change gears again. Did you see that Drake lost a $300,000 bet on the Copa America game?
No.
Drake bet, I believe $300,000 that Canada would beat Argentina in the Copa America semi, and Canada lost 2-0. Wow.
I think as the resident sport bettor on the podcast, I don't know if anyone else wants to claim that mantle, but I always find it fascinating. I mean, number one, Drake is somewhat famous for making quite large bets. So I think, you win some, you lose some. It kind of evens out in the wash a little bit. That number seems absurd to all of us and probably anybody else listening, but zeros are less important when you have the kind of net worth that Drake has, I'm sure. So there's a fascinating thread there on sports gambling and not, but I don't want to bore the group with it. I don't know if you all exist. So North Carolina just opened up sports betting. I don't know, Scott, I know you're similarly located. Luxury, I don't know about like Oregon, and Josh, I'm not sure about Texas as far as if it's legal to do or not do.
My headphones gave me a battery warning right as you were just referring to whatever is a thing you can or can't do. Could you repeat the question?
Is sports gambling legal in Oregon? Can you gamble?
I believe so. Not to narc, but I have friends who like set up accounts for people because they want to be able to sports gamble and whatever. And Oregon is one of the places that you can. So like come to like, I don't know what the permission is, but they need like an address or something that's like an Oregonian or some other legal address. And they'll be like, can I put it on your house? And there's one guy that had like 5 different people in his house allegedly for sports betting.
Yeah. I feel like this sports gambling thing, it's fine if you're doing it, $100 playing fantasy football, but some people get really hooked on it and get really bad. And I've definitely heard of friends who've had significant losses and keep doubling down. And so I think just needs to be the worst versions of it need to be regulated.
Yeah, I think like in general, like this is probably opening up like a whole conversation about smartphones and people, where I think like inherently a lot of what has happened with mobile is that like you're always just trying to draw user attention. I think like especially stuff that like enables gambling based habits, if you put those on mobile platform and like you're just able to like shine bright colors, like give like attention dragging mechanisms and put those like on command for someone, that just feels very, very dangerous to me in general. Where like there's like a whole like industry is like too broad of a term, but there's like a whole like theme of products that are born around like stop letting your phone take over your life. And like anything that's digital basically doesn't work. The ones that are, I know someone who like has bought like a literal phone prison where like you lock your phone in it fundamentally. And like there's a physical lock you have to decode to like get your phone out and use it basically. Cause they're just like taking up too much of her life. And she needed that to go away before she was able to be productive or useful for things again. So in general, like I think sports betting is obviously like one piece of that where that's a lot more extreme because those companies are like both trying to attract money being exchanged and attention, but it's all in all like pretty dangerous. I'm inclined to agree. Not to we don't think you're disease ridden, Damon. It's okay.
But I think so two comments. Number one, I agree completely. I think this gamification of that's right. That's right. Well, this is not, I think an unknown, but if I have a vice, it's gambling, no doubt about it. And so I'm always cautious with like, I only bet basketball. I only bet football. It's the only sports I know. So it's the only sports I bet. So I do think, to Shashi's point, there's a natural kind of regulation that people have to do with these things. And then to Lux's point, the gamification of these things combined with the natural human incentives that is bright colors and happy sounds, plus the allure of potentially winning money is a really powerful thing. I look at it a lot like I look at alcohol, truthfully, or tobacco or anything else that, kind of becomes a dangerous vice if people do not control their consumption of these things. I don't know inherently where the draw is, other than I think Luxay pointed out well that the mobile platform and this gamification of it has such strong, bonds, I suppose, with our psychology that I think it does become, a chemical dependency in the same ways that, alcohol or other kind of addictive substances do.
Yeah, there's this whole category of games, like this is outside of the context of betting, but just in general, taking these like luck-based systems and putting behind like a lot of flashy colors to them. There's this whole category of mobile games that are designed around that like core principle where they basically just want you to like pay for randomized loot packs. When you get something good in the loot pack, it's like very flash and very fun. Fundamentally, you're just paying for pixels, right? But like this is just like a more general thing that I feel is just like, for a lot of kids these days and like teenagers, like a lot of them grew up with that sort of thing. And like, I just think that has like a lot of ramifications for like, just in general, like reward signals and how you process them and like how you're able to like, again, if you're working on something and how you chase objectives and how you like a lot of people like to like think about the way that they work and get stuff done as like kind of gamified in nature. And a lot of these systems are like just entirely thrown off like reward systems in people's heads and kind of train them out of that sort of stuff and index on the wrong sort of things. I feel like has been pretty bad on society in general.
You bring up an interesting point. As you were talking about that, I'm reflecting on aspects of my childhood because mobile wasn't really a thing when I was, in the earliest, like 10 years old, that kind of thing. But trading cards hit a lot of the same psychological pain points that you're describing, right? You're essentially paying for flashy colors. You're kind of buying a randomized pack. You're buying whatever 5 to 10 to 15 in a pack, hoping that you get, the rarer of them out of that pack by your exchange of currency. It's interesting, those two parallels that I don't know that I've ever connected before you said that. So,
yeah. I mean, even I think like necessarily like it is the same principle. It's just the problem is like the immediate availability of mobile, right? Like if I were some child that likes playing some game and like for whatever reason, my like parents' credit card is on this iPad or whatever, like clicking a button that just gives me these packs over and over and over and over is something that's pretty trivial to do. Obviously there's more guards against doing something like that, but fundamentally like a lot of games and ways to play that are digital have this sort of mechanism embedded, right? That ends up being pretty, I imagine, hefty or in regards to like how someone is able to like process like working through things and chasing objectives and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, certainly. It's more about like I think it's more about like the rewarding systems. I was think people probably before they actually involving with gambling, they better to learn how to do stock or trading for NFT or cryptos. That'd be much funner than the gambling, to be honest. But it's like people need to learn how to control themselves before that. So it's more like against your personality or against your like decisions, against your like human natures for the gambling. Then it's like call it stop before it's actually losing it all.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because Scott, you mentioned this earlier, but like the entire NFT market is in many ways kind of the same thing, right? I mean, an NFT, for a strained analogy, is essentially a digital trading card, right? It's kind of a one of one, unique trading card. So I do think a lot of the same psychology that drives gambling, the purchasing of traditional trading cards, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, for that matter, probably are a lot the same. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think the NFT market is a little bit different from the gambling itself. It's more like a human driving. So it's more about like how those people will be liking this NFT, or how the entire like the NFT projects will be influence like the whole market. It's about a community. It's about how people, like a lot of people involving with the same project or not. So it will be deciding its price. So it's about like more like a socialized projects than a gambling. So it's more like a related, but most people, if they don't really know about this, they don't really know about the market itself and how the mechanisms working behind, they are losing a lot.
I feel like this is a commentary on crypto in general, but to me it feels like a lot of like, I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but like this sort of like mainstream, like almost like popularized crypto space ends up being a lot of this like, I am a person with a known brand, I get sponsored or someone brings me in to promote a crypto thing. It kind of ends up very pump or dump. And so in that way, like a lot of exposure that people end up having to crypto, like a lot of people who like would have no interest in crypto generally, but end up getting involved are folks who are like put on sort of the promise of like, oh, high monetary yield, whatever, and just ends up being a kind of a scammy scheme. I don't know if that's generally true. I would be curious if either of you, obviously both of you being more in the space than I am, have thoughts on like what non-popularized crypto looks like for a layperson. But I have no idea what that looks like, because all I've basically been exposed to is just like, oh, like this Twitch streamer got on this like crypto thing and just ended up just being like this like very controversial like delivery of something or another.
Yeah, I'm far from a crypto expert, but to me, it breaks out into one of two categories. There are the people that see crypto as gambling only. So those are people that are buying kind of these obscure coins, just hoping that they kind of 10x to 100x, and they're just trying to run a financial arbitrage game, buy low, sell high, that kind of thing. There's also the other camp of what I would consider true crypto enthusiasts who either believe in, number one, the replacement of traditional currency with new cryptocurrency, or number two, the replacement of kind of proof of stake, proof of work technologies into kind of hierarchical, trust systems. Basically, how can we create ledgers of things that actually, create a source of truth that wouldn't otherwise exist? So I think you have people buying for both reasons. A lot of people buying for the intersection of those two reasons. But to me, that's the kind of, generalist breakdown of where kind of cryptocurrency lives for someone who is not immersed in the world of cryptocurrencies themselves.
I would say I totally agree with them. And so basically, it's just like similar with trading for the stock. So people with actual they do the actual research about the company itself. They know the value behind the stock. They know how much money they're gonna earn in the next year or run. So they're doing the investment. But for most people, if they don't know about the knowledge about the company's backgrounds, they just randomly say, okay, today the price is going high, so I just all in to get all the cryptos or all the stocks. They are losing the money right away. So similar with trading for the cryptos. It's about the value or the projects behind the crypto itself. It's about its representative or the community, how strong the community is, and how much value it can bring in the future. So that about trading for the crypto or the stock, same thing.
Do you we've talked about this before in the context of ScholarAI, but we've talked about this proof of stake, proof of work thing, and in general trust. I think we've talked about how with AI systems and even with the stuff we do, trust is a very, very hard thing to get right. And even just in simply if we look at a research paper, a professional document as a item with a ledger on it. We've kind of talked about this concept, at least within the tech team, of what would it look like if the things that were AI generated were tokenized, right? What if it was very easy to trace AI generated content? Don't try and create systems that are very simply about try to detect AI, just very simply have a public record of here's the AI generated stuff in the world. You can trace it back and always kind of go up through this ledger to figure out what has been there, who made it, etc. Right. I guess the one question I'd poke is in my head, that seems like a really obvious idea. Why doesn't it exist? Why hasn't crypto had a major wave that's based off of AI and solutioning in that way?
So basically, for the crypto at this moment, I would say behind the whole trading or the mechanisms is about the money. So basically, where the money goes, where the crypto project will be raised, and so behind that, I mean, we talk about this before about the whole proof for the documentations or the academic papers about using the NFT or using the cryptos. So basically, it will be more let the process be more traceable, or is AI generate paper, or is some. I mean, we can basically build in the whole system on this. So if people want to, if they want to actually, for example, your paper be cited by other people, the cited will be traced by the different ways using kind of a knowledge graph or whatever. So once your paper be created, you're having a traceable tokens on it or the hash, and people can actually, once it's be cited, you can earn with the token itself. So kind of building the whole systems on it. It's kind of that's where the money to go. Well, just think about when you actually create your knowledge, you're basically writing a paper about specific things, and people cite your paper because they're using your knowledge and making the knowledge be traceable and be treatable. So making it more value. So I would say people will be much more willing to share the knowledge since it will be earn something from your paper.
You mentioned there's an element of this that is about where money in crypto goes, and obviously there's a number of VC firms that are crypto focused, or A16Z has a crypto sub department, right? What is the like where does crypto go? Like crypto capital go these days? Like where does funding in crypto go?
I would say it's still, it's turned into some like really worsening projects to do. So it's not more about like the crypto itself, but more about the blockchain developers. So it's about the projects that they actually building these things to try to create actually replace the real, like, the Web 2 stuff. So for example, like the one projects like the IPFS, it kind of like so the interplanetary file systems is basically try to replace for AWS, try to replace for some like the monopolies in the market for the cloud services or cloud storage. So they actually kind of like try to create like an environment to actually making all the file be shareable, like that also protect your privacies about stuff like specific things. So they actually try to change the world in their own ways. But I think that's actually work. So those are the projects like the money actually goes. So money like, okay, I will invest it. And then I'll be looking for like near future, like 5 years, 10 years. And once we like Elon Musk going to like going to Mars or going to like other planets, we can turn whole systems into the crypto worlds, like using the crypto worlds for trading, using IPFS for transport the files from Earth to Mars. That's kind of like the idea to go. So people are more looking for the blockchain combined with the AI right now. So AI is like the hot choice right now, but I would say the blockchain is also a hot topic. But just like it's costing time to actually combine with whatever we have right at this moment. At this point now, it's kind of impossible to actually replace everything in Web 2. But I would say it's giving sometimes it will be having some really good project work coming out.
Is
I think a lot of that. Sorry, I was just going to say, I think a lot of what Scott said is correct from an investment standpoint. I think that if you spoke with investors, a lot of them would be investing in blockchain technologies, not cryptocurrencies, which are, I think used synonymously, but do have important distinctions when it comes to what is the actual underlying technology being built. And then the comment on the intersection of AI and crypto, or AI and blockchain rather, I do think is a good one, but I do think fundamentally what you're talking about there is an intersection between two currently emerging technologies, neither of which are kind of mature. And typically before you can have an intersection, you essentially have, mature technologies that exist in silos. And so I do think that's probably where we're headed. All that said, I think there's another bottleneck that maybe is a topic for a different day. And that's the power consumption based on these things. Like both of those systems are inherently energy intensive in the form of electricity and otherwise. And, we already have a compute bottleneck for AI alone. You start stacking that on top of a blockchain network, you're going to kind of exponentially increase the amount of compute and therefore electricity necessary. So, I think it's probably, at least in my mind, a matter of when, not if, those two technologies kind of converge. But it would be difficult to speculate, I think, from at least my perspective on where we think we might be in that cycle.
The last question I had was just like, I also recognize we're running on time, but the last question I had, if I can get a brief answer, is like, you kind of mentioned like it's taking time to replace these Web 2.0 things with Web 3.0 things. Do you need like how full does the replacement need to be for something like a blockchain technology to actually have a meaningful impact on an existing product, right? Like if Amazon one day wants to say like, okay, we are integrating like IDFS as like a value, like a connectable like file system store into like our cloud compute services, right? How replete would like the migration from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0 work? Can you treat it kind of modularly where like file system and getting on Web 3.0 is enough to be a deliverable? Or do other parts of the system also need to have adopted blockchain before the entire thing can go live?
Yeah, I would say it's more about like how people gonna using it for. So, for example, like the IPFS, like they just like give me like a general ideas about how we're gonna using this in the future. It's just like when human actually launch on the Mars. So we try to build in kind of like the whole base on the Mars. It's costing probably like 30 minutes something to transfer one file from Earth to Mars. But in general, if you can having the whole IPFS system building on Mars, the whole system going to be just like copy paste from Earth to Mars directly. So you can bring the task from the Earth directly to the Mars and then transfer in there. All the file is like just shared among Mars, not really actually transfer from Earth to Mars. So basically, it's kind of like a more efficient way to share the file, or just like storage, like the human knowledge. So in that case, just like kind of like how people are going to be using this knowledge for. But at least at this moment, for only for like those people who actually believe in the blockchain, they're gonna using the IPFS to store these things. But a lot of people kind of worry about like the privacy and stuff, since the blockchain is like the IPFS right now is basically applied for everywhere. Like it's been using in almost like all the blockchain projects. They're using the IPFS as a basis storage for themselves, but not really with the AWS or with the cloud-based storage. So it's more about like how people are going to using it in the future.
Great. Well, Scott, this has been fun. So thanks everybody, as always, for joining us on the ScholarAI Founders Pod. Be sure to tune in next week for more episodes when more employees and founding employees of ScholarAI are going to be joining us. So thanks. See y'all next time.